Now the magnetic pole anomalies, that's a whole different thing to contend with. Don't know what's going to happen, as it seems to be the first time that we're in a grand solar minimum and the magnetic pole reversal or polar excursion, polar wander, whatever you like to call it, is happening, and the decomposition and weakening of our magnetic fields happening at the same time. Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne. I fly a lot. And recently I've also noticed that there's always disturbance in the seatbelt signs, always on these flights now. I don't care if it's just inner Asia, States, jumping back, Asia to Europe somewhere. The seatbelt sign is always on. I want you to notice that too if you're a flyer. Remember your previous flying experiences. You usually take off, you get up to altitude, cruising altitude, and then bing, and then everybody's cool until you land, and you can walk around and do whatever you like to do. I remember those days vividly. It was a time to get up and stretch. It was a time to chat in the back, have a drink, whatever. Another orange juice, please. But what I've noticed now, for sure in this last, I'm going to say 2 years, but this last year, especially these last 6 months going around, it's just nonstop seatbelt sign on. It's nonstop turbulence. Even at those higher altitudes up in our atmosphere, it is nonstop turbulence. So something is shifting for sure. A compression, perhaps. Our atmosphere is lowering in on itself. Now, if that were to happen, even what we would consider cruising altitude at 35,000 feet would be compressed, and yes, it would have more thickness to it, if you will. So it wouldn't be the light, almost bumpless air that we're used to. Now it's becoming part of the atmosphere that has agitation in it. Speaking of rains, we're going to come on. I want to talk about the rains for a second, too. Now, the amount of galactic cosmic rays is going to continue to cause rainfall increases. But the galactic cosmic rays are also going to be triggering more volcanoes as we go into this grand solar minimum deeper. Valentina Zarkova came out with her new report and said, before it warms again in 2036, which was the point of contention for most people looking at the report. Oh, she's saying it's global warming. It's going to global warming. It's going to warm again in 2036. She's a sellout. She got bought out. They're missing the big first paragraph that says, grand solar minimum starts in 2020. We lose food production globally. 2028, at least 50% goes offline. She's saying as much as 80%. 50 to 80% of all food grown on this planet will not be grown in 2028. Conditions will be too harsh. Then we'll get past that point, and then we will start to warm up again. Our atmosphere will readjust again. We will start to get back into warmer, grow conditions with more stable environment, but not until 2036. That's the point of her report. Now the magnetic pole anomalies, that's a whole different thing to contend with. Don't know what's going to happen, as it seems to be the first time that we're in a grand solar minimum and the magnetic pole reversal or polar excursion, polar wander, whatever you like to call it, is happening, and the decomposition and weakening of our magnetic fields happening at the same time. Those go hand in hand, the magnetic pole movement and the destabilization or the weakening of our magnetic field. Now, again, David DuByne and Rolf Witsche also put right around 2028 to 2030 a complete shutdown in the solar wind. They're talking about zero solar wind. Now, any of you that know about solar wind out there, that also helps compress our magnetosphere. And when there's no solar wind, it's very much like all the pressure's off and it can just turn into a light feather and whoosh, expand. So if we have the magnetic field, which will have weakened much more by that point, and the solar wind goes to zero, and it's cold, we're not going to be growing crops as much on the planet. We're going to have to bring it indoor to protect it. And I'm wondering what the rollover point will be in terms of starvation and famine globally before we actually go into action. And speaking of cycles, my new book with my co-author Bill Porter, Climate Revolution, a must-read for understanding our sun-driven climate. As we progress deeper into this new Eddy Grand Solar Minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity and higher food prices are here now. This book describes the expected changes, how to survive and thrive during future challenging times, and also practical preparations. The entire book is interactive with over 250 links, so you can click and go out to the scientific aspect of what we're talking about with the repeating cycles in this Grand Solar Minimum. The science is explained so you understand the mechanisms. The solutions are there because we know we're going to face these exact same problems again that were faced in the Maunder Minimum, the Sporer Minimum, the Wolf Minimum. Find designs for building greenhouses, grow guides, beam soil techniques, as well as bioreactors to create your own growth hormones for the soil. Available now, the new Adapt 2030 Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below. There's going to be a pivot point at some time, for sure, and there's no doubt about it. We're going to run into this at 100 miles an hour, no airbag, fine. But when we get to the point where people are starving to death and fighting for food, where they bring out the police and the army to stop the food riots, along with 5G to tweak a wave in the carrier frequency across the city, at what point will governments and industry jump in and go, hey, we can make a buck now? Wasn't profitable before until a lot of people died. Now it's more profitable. Let's start getting into vertical agriculture. I wonder at what point, what year, governments and industry will take action, because once they go into action, it'll be like a Manhattan Project. It'll be outfitted in like 2 years, the whole planet. We'll go from no vertical agriculture into a fully outfit. Our planet is now 50% vertical agriculture to produce what we just lost. There'll be that pivot point, I assure you, somewhere in the future. Will it happen this year, next year, 2021? Nope. 22, 23? That's when the food riots are going to occur and the famine will begin. Probably around 24, 25 would be my best guess. Now, the timeline of people waking up and becoming aware, like what you're listening to on this radio program and what I'm telling you right now, you're very lucky to hear it at the moment. And I'm not, trying to be all like, hey, I'm telling you. I'm not really. The only reason I try to purvey this information is to keep you and your families safe. Because if you're more prepared, that's awesome. I really hope everybody's more prepared. Because think about it. If there's millions of more prepared people out there, imagine the next community, there's got to be a few prepared people next to you as well. So you're not on an island by yourself. Because let's say there's 5,000 prepared people in your town or city, and there's 5,000 prepared people in the next town, there's 5,000 over in the next town or city. They're going to start to make their own grids of barter, exchange. They'll be the ones leading the communities into better systems, focusing on the food growth, the storage, the basics for pioneering lifestyle. I want you prepared, I truly do, and I want your families to be safe too. We may not know each other personally, but you're another sentient being on this planet. We're going to roll through this together. I really, really hope there's most people prepared as there possibly can be for this event. It's already on setting right now. And see, here's the interesting thing. Valentina Zarkova says it starts 2020. Like in earnest, the globe is going to shake in 2020 is kind of the way she put it. And we are already seeing the beginning of the shaking right now. If this much occurred in this last 10 days, in terms of anomalies across the planet, tectonic anomalies, volcanic anomalies, jet stream anomalies, oceanic anomalies, temperature anomalies, rainfall anomalies, whew, I'm going to hold my breath for a second and go, wow. I don't even know what 2020 is going to bring. But for sure, the end of 2019 is going to bring the end of our grow zones inside the United States. And it's all about the food production. Now, think about all these things happening normally. Now, if we had all of our food indoor and we could protect all of our agriculture and it had been set up that way, none of this would matter. None of it would matter. We would go bouncing through this Grand Solar Minimum like, ha, whatever. But it's not. We still live in a fully open agricultural system. it's nearly 100% exposed to the elements. There's very little vertical agriculture. I mean, yeah, we have some greenhouses, some mushroom grow down in a cave somewhere, but predominantly that's not even 1/10 of 1% of the full planet's production of food. So we'll see we have 99.9% to turn over to a new system. Now, being that vulnerable and that exposed to the elements that are changing so quickly, that's a problem for some. It's an opportunity for others. I see it as a huge opportunity right now because I see what's going to happen, so I'm positioning myself for the changes. I'm not chasing the changes. I'm positioning myself in front of the change that I think, with my best guess, that will happen based on all the people I talk to and all the research I do. And I get a really good ballpark figure where it's going to. And then I'm stepping out there in front, waiting for things to come to me, not chasing. Control the simulation. Move the levers and knobs yourself. How good is your crystal ball? You know, the economy is going to morph. The systems that we grow our food and the way we grow our food is going to morph. Just those two alone should give you a huge, huge, huge jump in front of everybody else. Food and economy. If you know how those might be affected and you know that there has to be replacements for the current system that we are operating in, that's your first step. That was my first step. Was thinking, all right, this is going to change, that's going to change. Now, what are people going to need after it changes? Because take a look at some of these rainfall totals here. U.S. breaks 125-year rain record across the United States. 125-year rain record this last year. This is from NOAA. And they put the average June precipitation and 0.37 inches, but this year it's 10 times higher at 3.74 inches, the wettest period. So as they come through and they're measuring the rainfall for the United States, it's the most rain ever, well, 125 years. That's kind of at the edge of any temperature or data collection in the U.S. But here now, this is the thing that I really can hammer home for today's program is Storm Barry being the end of this year's agriculture in the United States. This storm singularly, a super soaker. The same areas that have been flooded through the first round of floods since spring that created No Plant 19. And if you're not familiar with No Plant, hashtag NoPlant19, I highly encourage you to jump onto Twitter or your favorite. I like Minds, M-I-N-D-S. I like Gab too. And put in hashtag NoPlant19 and see what images come up that will shock you. Nothing's growing. Very little is growing out in our fields at the moment. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. And there's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. You know, microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds. They're lucky if it's ankle high now, maybe shin high at best in so many places. Scrappy emerged, that's what the USDA calls it, scrappy emergence. Now, see, here's the thing I think they faked in the report. Going into the USDA report that was released at the end of May, the scrappy emergence was over 60% of our entire crop that was planted. Forget the non-planted crop acreage. That was 36 million acres this year of no plant. Literally, the farmers are taking an insurance and they're not planting these acres. So what was left that did emerge out was called scrappy emergence. That was almost 60%, 58% of the total amount of stuff coming out of the ground that came out in terms of a green plant is termed scrappy emergence. And that means barely growing. Horrible conditions, barely growing. I know the vultures on Wall Street are going to just start scalping and coming in and raising prices based on the storm. But they sure didn't do anything with the fake USDA report in May. Insider trading, CFTC, I'm going to say it again, CFTC, you need to investigate what happened with that May 28th USDA crop report. USDA said it was going to raise 2% of the total production in the United States. Increase 2%. And even a simple search across any social media, just following the record floods. I mean, the directors up there at the USDA could have followed hashtag NoPlant19 on Twitter and Facebook and had enough analysis to say, we're not going to increase 2% this year. Let's pull the report back. Let's take a look at it. Maybe we can revamp it. Maybe we could postpone it. But they let it out there on the market. And again, soybeans were doing quite well. And the USDA report comes out and says soybeans are going to decrease, but corn's going to increase. Wiped out an enormous amount of farmers out there because the news stories had told them if you cannot deliver your corn, go long on corn, leverage it out, get ready for the huge corn price rises because you're not going to deliver. So if your obligation for contract, you can pay cash on your obligation. So there was an enormous amount of articles trying to walk farmers through buying long on the corn calls to try to protect their interests because they couldn't physically deliver. And then the USDA came in and put it's going to increase 2%. So the market dropped like a hot rock. Everybody got called and stopped out. They lost their farms on that report. Thousands of small farmers lost all on that report. But on the same side in the trading houses, people made billions that day. And again, it's almost like Trading Places, that one movie with Eddie Murphy back in the 80s. Who had privy information to that report? Because the way they placed those 180,000 contracts, the opposite direction of what the entire market was thinking, real reality with all the social media posts out there, everybody talking about it anywhere, left, right, and center, it's a loss, it's a loss, it's a loss, it's the biggest ever, it's the most ever. Food prices are going to rise because we just don't have enough corn. We got to stop ethanol production because we don't have enough corn. And somebody put a bet of 180,000 short calls on that, going the opposite of the market for corn, and then they took long calls out for the soybeans when they showed it dropped. What? Who had that information? Who had that information? Almost 500,000 contracts were put the opposite direction days before that corn report was released and the soybean report. Insider trading for sure. CFTC will not investigate. I just released a volcano video yesterday. You might want to take a look at it. So everything I'm telling you earlier, I've already done it in images. But when it comes down to a private citizen like myself taking it on because the USDA can't give you the correct information, I feel your safety is much more valuable. It's worth my time to put these reports out. We're all in it together. You're not going to run. I'm not going to run. We're all here. There's nowhere to go. It's like we pitch in and we start bailing the boat together or we all sink together. That's the point we're at right now. I'm going to do my own little niche here. This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.